You're listening to the And I Quote podcast, brought to you by Coterie Insurance. And I Quote is hosted by Ann Boger, VP of Scaling,
and Brian Thomas, Director of Claims Experience. We're bringing you conversations with insurance agents, brokers, leaders, and small business owners. Each episode will dive into the importance of building relationships within the insurance industry.
Relationships are the foundation of building a trustworthy connection. Together, we can learn from other stories and experiences.
So let's jump right into the episode.
And I quote. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the And I Quote podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ann Boger, VP of Scaling. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing two colleagues of mine, Pete Buccola, VP of Insurance, and Paul Bessire, VP of Data and Analytics. I have brought them to the show with me today because we are introducing a new, simpler way to quote and issue policies. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Pete, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is in updating our dashboard.
Sure. I'm Pete Buccola. I'm VP of Insurance here at Coterie, and I've been in insurance space for over 17 years. And I started my career as an underwriter, evaluating risks and working with agents to place risks with the insurance that they needed, and have been in a variety of underwriting leadership roles in the West Coast with the Travelers, and then most recently with Blackboard. I joined Coterie in 2020, and I'm just real excited about what we're bringing to agents and customers in the new dashboard that's really going to accelerate their ability and enable their ability to transact that micro and small commercial business opportunity with much more ease and speed.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm not not quite the yin to Pete's yang, but I'm close because I don't have as much direct insurance experience necessarily, but about the same amount of overall experience, 18 years in the data field. Most of my experience, though, has been in entrepreneurship and startups. I love solving problems with data and data science. It's kind of ironic that I'm back in insurance because all of my internships when I was in college were in the insurance field. And when I graduated with a master's in data science, which was called something completely different at the time, most of the people that I was in my class with all went into actuarial sciences. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to pursue a slightly different passion and path and apply data to sports. Did that for a while. Ultimately got into consulting, and then as of just over a year ago, March of 2021, realized that this was the problem I definitely wanted to be solving, and working with people like Pete to do so. Really, my main role overall, and with SimplyBind and this new experience that we've launched, is to boost how we leverage data to make more efficient decisions. Goal of that, obviously, to automate underwriting. And if you cut to what we have with SimplyBind, then we achieve this by pulling many third-party vendors, all with public information that aggregate them in different ways and solve slightly different problems for us, and some predictive analysis to really escalate and optimize the lead to quote to bind process for agents.
Paul, what's your favorite thing about working at Coterie?
The people. It sounds cliche. I hope most people working in any businesses would say that first, but in this case, it's very real. I love the culture. I've known several of the people in Coterie. I'm a Cincinnati native, and have been in the startup scene for a while. I've known several people from Coterie for a while, and everybody I've met since then, including the two people on the screen in front of me, I've definitely appreciated as well. And so, it starts with the people, and not just the people and their personalities and the culture, which is all great. But it's the fact that we have some diverse perspectives. A little over half of our company, but not all of our company, has insurance background. That allows us to think a little bit differently, but it makes sure that we get the insurance part right, because that expertise, like Pete has and many others have, is right there. And about 2/3 of the company has big co experience, but where there's still that startup vibe and that entrepreneurship vibe that lives within the business. So that balance, or something close to a balance of those types of perspectives, I think is valuable and incredibly valuable as we take on this big industry. And ultimately with the work, if I'm going to get away from the cultural components and get a little bit more into the hard skills, I'm always going to be attracted to change in an industry that has either moved slow or where there just hasn't been that much innovation. And here we've got the intersection of technology and data that allows us to really provide what we need to provide to the industry.
What about you, Pete? What's your favorite thing?
Yeah, I would just add on to that. I think we hire people on their superpowers and what they bring to the team, and so because everyone has different perspectives, they are bringing different elements to solving a problem. And really, my favorite thing though at Coterie, what that brings is we really focus first on solving for an experience. So we have this end in mind of what we're trying to solve for with an experience, and then we're solving around how do we make that work within the confines of the regulatory landscape, the rating complexity, the data complexity that's involved, and rallying around that, and actually seeing it come to fruition much more quickly than say a scenario where we might have to get approvals and wait for committees to approve things. It's really been fun to build a product like this in a relatively short amount of time, and yet with a tremendous amount of complexity involved. It's been fun.
Yeah, so we're launching the Simply Bind experience, which is a refresh of the dashboard that our agents use when they're working with their clients with us now. Paul, how did that refresh come about? Where did the idea start from?
Well, I'll certainly state I wouldn't say that the refresh is commentary on deficiencies in the previous dashboard experience. This is just the natural evolution of the vision that our CEO David McFarland and others have had, Pete and I included in that, ever since wanting to start or join Coterie. And the key here is that even though the Coterie as it existed, the agent dashboard experience has existed for over a year previously to launching Simply Bind, even though that was already taking pretty big steps forward with the agent experience relative to the industry, even in the insurtech space, we knew that we could make it faster. We knew we could make it easier. We could get more granular and more appropriate with our underwriting. And still, all throughout all of that, we knew that we could also enable our producers, our agencies, our partners, our carriers, everybody involved in the insurance process. We could allow with Simply Bind and as something, a tool very similar to the tool of this ilk. We knew that we could help all of the players in this space grow and scale just as we were over time. And so this is kind of the manifestation, or at least the next step in the evolving agent experience on Coterie to make sure that we achieve what we set out to achieve to begin with.
Awesome. So, Pete, as you've embarked on this journey, what have you learned along the way? What surprised you, or what's been the biggest learning in this process?
I'd say that when you're building something that's this complex, we're essentially trying to efficiently and intelligently understand what a risk is, what their needs are, is it a good risk or a bad risk, and if we want to offer coverage to them, at what price and terms. Like there's a lot of decisions in that. And I've learned probably three quick things. The first thing is you really need to define and have an end in mind. By having that end in mind, it really helps you sequentially build the blocks in between. And we had an end in mind that was, we want essentially to be able to quote and make those decisions on name and address. And we want to be able to make certain types of decisions. And we want to be able to have a certain understanding of that customer by the end. And so that helped us build out each of the iterative steps along the way. The second part, I would say, was I learned was you can't go it alone. We were really struggling to build this until Paul and his team got involved. And it sounds obvious today, but our ability to make intelligent decisions is is really about having the peanut butter and the jelly. I mean, we really needed to have the data connectivity and understanding how the data is going to interact and get stored and used, and which data and when, in order to actually make a decision on something. And so our two teams worked together very closely and still will be. And it's been great to collaborate in that regard. And I'd say the last thing I learned is not making the mistake of trying to do it all at once in order to define when you can launch something. So, we wanted to show success. We wanted to show velocity and allow customers and agents to uh, benefit from what we had built. And so we didn't want to make the risk of trying to overscope and get the absolute perfect thing out the door. So we've built a very good product that has integrity to it, that accomplishes our overall goals. And our ability to launch this is really predicated on making sure that we're not overly, trying to create something that eventually will never get launched, right? And so the product we have is very powerful, and it is a meaningful. It's going to have a meaningful impact in the market to our agents, and we hope that they perceive that.
Yeah, I love and
Oh,
agree
what
with
did you
all of that.
learn? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up though because I'm really curious if we're both PB, who's Jelly. That's the only piece I couldn't quite figure out with everything that Pete just mentioned. But I totally agree with everything that he stated there.
Were there any big surprises for you coming at it from a data perspective, but not such an insurance background?
Yeah, I think it's a tremendous question because everything was new. Some of it was surprising. I think the level of effort and complexity that went into behind the scenes was amazing. We have over 100 years of underwriting experience that worked on developing the rules that power Simply Bind. This isn't purely a data science project, especially initially. It's really more the opposite. It's leveraging data to then empower underwriters to simultaneously do something that I think is really interesting. Traditionally underwriters, it's a fairly manual process, and underwriters will take a look at every individual policy. But usually, you're still as an underwriter, you're making kind of broader decision, or you are understanding implications of the information that you are trying to find on more of a broader sense, thinking of homogeneous groups, et cetera. It's a really interesting, kind of fairly normal thing to do in insurance. But yet, in that case, that doesn't scale incredibly well because you still have to have manual underwriters for every situation. Here, we can have a few underwriters with tremendous experience continue to operate and man our entire book of business, so they're worried and focus a little bit less individually on every one policy. And yet, because of how we leverage data and because of all of the levers that we could pull based off of those data points, the policy actually is as curated as it possibly can be just to the business itself. And that's the thing that I think was really interesting. I didn't quite understand the underwriting process in the past, but the fact that we can actually do more in terms of how we underwrite and yet be more specific without having to treat homogeneous groups as truly homogeneous is really the key. You could have two places directly across the street from each other that theoretically and seemingly do the same thing, but the data might state that the roof condition on one of them is significantly worse than the other, or that the revenue or the number of employees is very different. We want to make sure we have the best and most appropriate price, and that's how we can get granular with this tool.
I love that. It actually brings home to me a core theme of this podcast, and I quote, which is really to talk about relationships and how relationships are so important in any business, especially in the insurance space. And I'm wondering if you two could chat a little bit about how you see the Simply Bind experiencing fueling relationships with our agents, with small business owners, and between them.
Yeah, I want to jump in first here because I have stated for a very long time that if you go on LinkedIn or if you happen to catch a resume, which I'm not sure I've updated for a while, but if you happen to see it, it's just nerd, 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 nerd. Fine, it's all data. I get it, but I feel as though like my entire career has been based off of relationships. I'd rather spend the time and derive my energy from people. And so because of that, data helps me automate and solve problems more quickly and efficiently. Everything else in my life, it's the relationships then that I can get to invest in, and I think that's very similar to what we're asking for or what we're looking now to empower our agents to do. Because relationships is what matters. We want our agents to spend very little time like filling out forms and worried about this back and forth. I'm a consumer of insurance. I've been a small business insurance consumer before as well, and it doesn't sound exciting to me to go back and forth on a questionnaire with an agent. But I still will hire an agent because I want to trust someone. I'd prefer to trust someone one time and sorry, meet one person one time, gain that person's trust, and vice versa, and then trust them for everything after that. And that includes personal lines as well as commercial lines, as well as anything else I might ever be looking at. And now the agent gets to focus on that rather than like figuring out whether every dotted I or crossed T is exactly what it needs to be in 150 different places on one form, and then trying to take that quote by quote, line by line, product line by or product by product everywhere else. I'd much rather that the agents felt as though gaining the trust and maintaining that relationship was really what their value add is, because I think it is.
I had a guest on the podcast just a couple weeks ago who was talking about that building of relationship and how she wants to spend her time actually following her small businesses on LinkedIn, Facebook, other places to see what's changing in their business so she can say, hey, congrats on that new thing. You probably need a policy update, and help them maintain and grow their businesses rather than filling out forms. And so what you said just really struck me. Pete, you had something to add.
Well, yeah, I just would add to that. What this is doing in that exact example, in building trust with that producer, what we're doing a lot of complex stuff on the back end to make that front end more seamless and easy, so that they can have that focus on the customer. And I would also say, any agent out there that has dealt with carriers back and forth, you really don't know if you're going to be able to bind that policy until the credit card is accepted, right? There's maybe another app or another question to answer. And so one of the hallmarks of our experience is at Coterie, when you see a price, it's bindable. And so we're giving the agent more integrity and more a higher level of confidence to the buyer that, yes, I can deliver on this. I can place your insurance with Coterie, and we have a bindable option here, and not having any uncertainty or going back and forth about the underwriter changing their mind if they change an answer or something like that. So that's a key feature of ours at Coterie that I think is really going to double down on helping the agent have credibility in the market.
That's a great point. When an agent signs in to the new Simply Bind experience for the first time, what do you hope they notice first, Pete?
They're going to notice that we focus really on who the customer is first. And through that discovery of who that customer is, we then are pushing to them information that we know that we would like them to validate. And then we're going to ask them and recommend what they want to buy and what they should buy. So we're flipping what they may see in other portals around, where first they're saying, hey, what do you want to buy? Oh, okay, you want to buy this? All right, now that you want to buy this, tell us more about you. And then at the very end, they make them tell us who the customer is, right? So we're flipping that around, and it's really all about who is this individual, and then we can then display to them what it is that we can offer this customer based off of their geography, their business, and our appetite. And then we're going to be building out and have resources for agents to understand more about our product, appetite, coverage, and so forth, to support sales support around that purchase.
What was the most fun part of building this?
I think Pete and I are thinking about probably several examples. No, we're both thinking about several examples, I'm sure, together. To me, it's very similar to the question that you asked me, Ann, earlier about what surprised me. It's also what was fun. It was so fun to see the underwriters do their jobs, and because it was almost like an opus for an underwriter to me. And that maybe that's just like that normal everyday what underwriters love doing, and to some degree that's probably true, but. To see someone, and in this case, a few people, try to build out the most parameterized, comprehensive perspective on appetite and rules and pricing and forms and exclusions and endorsements, so that we absolutely left both no stone unturned, and in the process got the insurance right. This is an insurance business, and where we have seen that not every insurtech is necessarily always focused on that. It's a strength of ours, and so to me, the most fun part was I'm ecstatic about where this is headed. I love the idea of all of our data sources getting better and smarter and faster. I love the ideas of what we're going to do to provide agents leads. And to your exact example, Anne, we can serve that up on a platter to an agent and say, hey, this person is celebrating something because we saw it on some social monitor or social media feed that our systems monitor. So reach out. We can do all of that in the future. Cool. I'm excited. That enthusiasm clearly has not gone away. But getting to see the process that, you know, 100+ years of underwriting experience gets to go through to write the big, like, book of small commercial insurance underwriting was really the most compelling piece for me.
What about you, Pete?
I would say, as an underwriter that's been slogging through very manual processes and um, a lot of manuals and rules and so forth, to see us do all this work and then actually sit with our product and design and engineering teams, which need to get a tremendous amount of credit for this as well. They're the third leg of the stool. Working with those teams, actually see this come to fruition is in basically 8-9 months, was just absolutely thrilling. And the empowerment we give the underwriters, our underwriting team, to actually make changes and build these rules and measure it and monitor it over time. It's in real time by themselves is just an underwriter's dream. And that for me was the coolest part. I mean, I actually I almost started getting welled up. I mean, I can't believe. I mean, they just did a fantastic job. I was like, I can't believe
I'll
the
back
work
Pete up on that. Yeah. I'll back Pete up on I totally got emotional when we bought about our first policy for two reasons. One, it happened, just the fact that all of that work went into that. But the actual story of, like, the first quotes and bound policies of Simply Bind is also really interesting, where we had an agent in Florida who was trying to buy some bot policies, who was looking at property coverage, and one of our data sources flagged it as potentially a concern for hail score. And what was really interesting was all of that information then we could see to know should we accept this or not. And it allowed us to make, and to Pete's point, it allowed our underwriters to make immediate decisions about, and very tangible decisions about, how we treated that specific situation. It wasn't necessarily a situation that we thought was going to happen relative to our data source in that very, very specific case. It's a very normal situation to occur, but the way in which that was applied allowed us to react immediately to it, and get an agent that was stuck for a few seconds to that bind that quickly. And obviously over time, the likelihood or the chances of those types of things happening is going to be smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But the fact that there was just direct control from the underwriter at that moment was really exciting to see. Like, you got the keys to the tool.
Could you talk a little bit about the testing process in terms of how you all engaged live, active independent agents in that sort of pre-launch testing and planning?
There were three main components of testing that I'll talk about. Pete, definitely jump in here in a second. The three main points were the testing we did just to call all of our data sources and evaluate all of the information that we received, knowing that our book of business should be at least should be accurate, because we receive that information directly from the agents themselves, and comparing that against the data sources was really valuable. We would find which data sources could be the most powerful going forward. We could find some that maybe we thought we were excited about, but didn't necessarily think would meet our use case or our coverage expectations. And that was, one piece of it. Then we did a lot of internal testing around, trying to make rules and break them, and making sure that all of the insurance underwriting components were accurately portrayed within the tool. And then there was finally more of a user experience training that you were just alluding to, Anne, which is sitting with agents and literally saying, walking them through the new tool, which to Pete's point is very different than anything else in the industry, because it starts at the end of what used to be the end, and we just flipped the whole script around so that there's fewer questions to answer, and we can skip right to recommendations and suggestions. And so that was compelling. We learned a lot from our agents. We made modifications, sometimes on the fly, and definitely throughout the testing before this launched to all agents. We wanted to make sure to mitigate all of those concerns with a combination of a couple things: being okay to say that we had it wrong to begin with, and making the changes. But if we didn't have it wrong, or if we do think that the approaches that we're sticking to is right, it's more about education then. It's about really trying to get into explaining, like, what are we trying to accomplish? Why is this step here versus this step here? And making sure that, our agents have throughout this process and in any interaction with Coterie, have any education and support that they feel that they need. Because our mantra as an organization is not just speed and simplicity, which is great, and that's what Simply Bind has a lot of, but it's speed, simplicity, and service. And we wanted to make sure throughout that testing we got that part right as well.
Totally agree. Yep. It's whenever you ask the customer for feedback and you're prepared to listen to it and act on it, there's a lot of magic that can happen. So we made some really, really great improvements to the design and the flow, and that have material, impact and help the product just be even better.
So Pete, what else do you have up your sleeve? What are some other updates or improvements on our product or other things that any agents that are listening should keep an eye out for?
Yeah. Well, we're really excited to be live in 50 states. So that's a exciting opportunity for us to be able to serve our agents and customers across the country. We're going to be rolling out a number of things. The first thing is workers' compensation. We're going to be layering in work comp in 2022. So that's an offering, a coverage that will have a very similar experience, and be able to layer that line of insurance into what we can offer that customer. We're also going to be making a lot of enhancements to the BOP product, continuing to enhance what coverages are available to specific industries, more flexibility with some of the current coverages like contractors tools, and other sublimits that can be available, and also enhancing the recommendations based off of specific attributes of that customer. And then the last thing, it's our goal over time at Coterie, is to really offer more limits of insurance to those customers that want to buy higher liability insurance limits, for instance, or possibly have more property on the premises. So we're working on the underwriting that's needed to do that, in addition to rolling out and expanding our appetite for and up to and including lesser's risk and real estate owner risks. So that'll be very exciting for us to roll out later this year.
Sound like a very busy man. I'm so glad we had both of you join today. We could talk all day, but we're going to close it there. Thanks so much for being guests on And I Quote.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, Ann. This was great.
Thank you for listening to And I Quote, a podcast focusing on telling the stories of agents, brokers, partners, and small business owners.
We hope you take away something from every episode you listen to and can build onto your strength of connecting with your audience and forming that trusting relationship.
And I Quote is brought to you by Coterie Insurance. Coterie is available across the nation and is creating a product that brings our partners speed, simplicity, and service. Through our new Simply Bind experience on the Coterie Dashboard, you can get a quote by answering 2 questions.
And seriously, we will do the rest for you because relationships matter. Take a look at our show notes for more information and news.